Okay, let's now have a look at an overview of the work health and safety obligations that are owed by employers in Australia. Firstly, under the Work Health and Safety Act 2011, which is the act that I'll be looking at today and is the act that will most likely cover High Commission, Embassy or Consulate, as your operations will more than likely be in Canberra, which is covered by the Work Health and Safety Act. We have this concept of a primary duty of care, the main duty of care, being owed by a person carrying on a business or an undertaking, commonly called a PCBU. So this is essentially just the organisation itself. So it will be the High Commission or the Embassy who owes this primary duty of care, and the duty is owed to any workers. So workers is broader than just employees. It can include contractors, it can include even volunteers. And the primary duty of care is essentially to do all that is reasonably practicable to ensure the health and safety of workers. How far do you have to go? How much do you have to do to ensure the health and safety of workers? Also a duty to ensure the health and safety of any other persons who might be affected by your operations. Section 18 of the Act gives us some guidance on what is reasonably practicable, that is what you have to do, how far you have to go to keep people healthy and safe. And it tells us the sort of things that a court will take into account and look at to decide whether you have done all that you should, whether you have gone far enough. The first thing under Section 18 of the Act that the court will look at in deciding what is reasonably practicable is the likelihood of the hazard occurring. So how likely is it that the risk is going to occur to health and safety? Secondly, the court will look at the degree of harm. How bad will the result be if the risk eventuates? Thirdly, and very importantly, the court will look at what the organisation knows or ought to have known about the particular risk. The court will also look at the availability and suitability of ways to eliminate or minimise the risk, that is what was immediately available to you to address the risk, and obviously if there was something available to address a risk and you didn't use it, you're more likely to be found liable in the case of an injury. Finally, the court will look at the cost of taking action to address a risk by reducing or minimising it. Cost is in the mix, but it's generally the last thing that the court will look at. So those factors are looked at. No one is determinative, rather the courts will look at the whole situation, weighing up all of those factors to come to a conclusion about whether you have discharged that duty as an organisation to do all that is reasonably practicable to ensure the health and safety of your workers. As well as that primary duty that the organisation has, officers within the organisation also have a duty. An officer of an organisation is defined as a person who makes or participates in making decisions that affect the whole or a substantial part of the business or undertaking. To discharge his or her duty of due diligence, an officer must do at a minimum a range of things like verifying and auditing any systems that are in place to make sure they're working, acquiring and keeping up to date with knowledge of work health and safety matters, ensuring that work health and safety matters are constantly on the agenda of an organisation and being considered, ensuring that any risks are brought to the attention of the organisation. Workers also have duties, or actually a range of duties, to take reasonable care for their own health and safety, to make sure by taking reasonable care that their acts or omissions do not affect other people's health and safety. Also an explicit duty to comply with any policies or procedures that are in place and to cooperate with those policies and procedures. So we see we have a cascading series of duties, primary duty on the organisation, a duty on the senior members of the organisation, the officers, to do all that he or she can to assist in discharging that primary duty, and then further duties on workers. There are a range of penalties under the Act, and certainly some of the penalties for organisations and officers are quite significant in terms of the monetary amount of fines that can be imposed in case of a breach, and also indeed in cases of serious injury or death, potentially prison sentences for officers of organisations. So some quite significant penalties are in place.